Massive thank you as always to our top tier patrons Sarah Turner and Alexander Lashley. It's Not Just in Your Head is hosted by psychotherapist Dr. Harriet Frodd, addiction and substance misuse disorder counsellor Ikoi Hiro, and myself, editor and producer Liam Tate. This podcast is entirely funded by listeners, and as the famous meme states, we are critiquing capitalism because we are forced to participate in it in order to survive. So if you can afford to support the podcast, then your contribution will ensure that we can keep making this show. However, if you can't, then please just tell your friends about us, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and follow us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, and YouTube. Today, we're joined by clinical psychologist Dr. Naomi Fisher, author of Changing Our Minds, How Children Can Take Control of Their Own Learning. We discuss how the school system frequently fails to meet people's needs, the children, the teachers, and the parents. How schools often enforce compliance and alienation instead of allowing children to follow their natural curiosity. It's a fairly broad-ranging discussion, but really fascinating, and hopefully you'll find it as thought-provoking as we did.
In the mental health field, too often, we've made it seem as if it's just in your head.
The landlord can hijack the rent by 20%. That impacts people's mental health.
Can't have a profit-driven mental health care system if we want our people to be connected and healthy.
Most people have been traumatized by school in some way or another, so it was quite validating to read. But I thought maybe as a sort of interesting, or maybe simple, but potentially kind of big question to start with is, what is school for?
Ooh, that is an interesting question. Well, it depends who you ask and at what different time you mean, I suppose. I mean, for parents, school is a place for children to go where they are looked after during the day, which is a really, really important part of school for most families and parents. For the government, certainly in England at the moment, I think it is the same in the US, it's partly about kind of molding children into a certain kind of way of thinking, way of being. And I think we don't talk enough about what school is really for. There's a kind of assumption that we know what it's for. And actually that very rarely gets properly talked about. We certainly in England, most of the conversation about what it's for is it's for getting exam results. It's for doing, but no one ever talks about the bigger purpose of that. So why are we getting the exam results? What's it for? That kind of just doesn't get talked about. So that leads us down these pathways where we talk about evidence-based learning, and it's all about getting better exam results, but no one ever says really why do we have to do that. And one of the things I write about quite a lot is how in England we have these exams that young people take at age 16 as well as ones they take at age 18 before they go to university. And young people are told at school that these exams at 16 are really, really important. You know, that if you fail your GCSEs, you're likely to never get a good job, to never be successful. So they're right from early on, they're kind of indoctrinated into this idea that you've got to do these exams and you've got to do well. And then you get over 16 and of course a proportion of kids fail. And then it turns out actually there are other opportunities to do those exams again if you need to. You know, it's not actually the end of the world if you haven't passed your exams when you're 16. But we're kind of telling children it is. And I think that's really destructive. I think what we're doing in our schools can be really destructive because of that.
Yeah, and it's really interesting as well. Like you had some stuff earlier in the book just talking about, you know, the difference between education and school, and the assumption being that school is where you get an education. And I don't know if you wanted to sort of expand on the difference or the definition.
Yes. In fact, it was only when I started really writing my book, I really started pulling apart that difference, because I was looking at how different people talk about education. And what I discovered is that mostly people use education and school to be synonymous. So when people talk about raising, childhood, improving lives of children, it's all about school, get them into school, get them more doing school, as if school is just this inevitable place for children to be and unquestionably the right place for them to learn. One of the things actually that particularly inspired me was that I grew up in two different African countries, in Botswana and in the Congo. And so I saw very different ways of education, but I also saw how the education system that we have in the UK has kind of been imported, and that means from the US as well. It's not just the UK, but has been kind of imported to the whole world as the way to do education. And we've told other people this is the way to do education. We've often attached lots of funding to that. So, you know, there are if you go to various different African countries, there will be lots of money being sent in foreign aid for schools, to build schools, with this assumption that this is what children need, that we need to put children in schools, and that's the best place for them to learn. And then if you think about, as a psychologist, as a clinical and a developmental psychologist, all the stuff I know about how children learn, basically none of it says the best way to do it is put them in classrooms and put someone at the front of the classroom and tell them stuff and then get them to remember it. You know, that just doesn't come up in the developmental the child developmental literature. But it does, but yet that's how we've organized all of our schools. And so I think that education is a process of learning, and it's a process of learning to be who you are. And it's a process of learning to think of yourself as a learner, which actually I think most children do right from the beginning. And unfortunately, I think school takes away a lot of that, because school says education is about learning this predetermined curriculum, which we have decided for you. Your task is to learn it, remember it, pass the test. And I think almost that's the antithesis of really what education should be.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember as a kid, like you'd see TV reports of children in so-called developing countries like being happy to go to school, and I was like, are you mad?
It's interesting. That was one of the things that made me think about it, actually, because I saw so much rhetoric. And when I was at university, so I'd lived in these different African countries, and I went to university, there was a big push in lots of the universities. In my university, there was a big push to kind of raise money for education. You know, let's go build schools in Africa. I think there was even a charity called Schools for Africa, and people were going off in their summer holidays to build schools. And I was like, but hang on, if you think about schools in this country, look at how many problems we have at schools in this country, but yet we're behaving as if we've sorted it here. All we need to do is export our model to other countries, and look, you could do it like us. And the thing is that children can be happy to go to school when they think that it's going to be a great opportunity for them. You know, small children are usually happy to go to school in most countries in the world, actually, because they're told it's this great thing for them, and this is where they're going to have fun, and they're going to meet their friends and everything. And then as you progress, they get less and less and less excited about going to school. In my experience, the disillusionment sets in. But I've recently had interesting conversations actually with people who've told me that they've even read my book. There's someone who's working in Zimbabwe, and I've heard that they've read my book, and that there's actually, we have this illusion, I think, often from the West that, you know, children in, say, Zimbabwe are all happy to go to school, but actually there are still children who are being failed. I mean, there are children who are being failed by all sorts of things in Zimbabwe, but even within the education system, there are still children for whom it just doesn't work.
What you say in your book really is the emphasis on autonomy, that the kids are essentially allowed to direct their own learning. And I can imagine to a lot of parents that sounds like chaos or something like that. But you're just saying before the recording of this, like both Iko and myself, when we were children, definitely had something obviously that was kind of oppositional. And I think a lot of, you know, you outlined pretty successfully in your book, like a lot of what appears to be, you know, oppositional behavior is really the kid trying to tell the adult something, like they're like, you know, they're not happy.
Yeah.
This doesn't work for me.
Yeah, it's survival, isn't it? And I think there's a great book that I really like called Troublemakers by Carla Shalaby, and she followed 6 young children who were very disruptive at school. And it's a really close observation of these children. She writes about it. And as you read the book, you start to see the world through those children's eyes, which, you know, I think might work quite well for both of you. But you start to question why the other children are behaving the way they are, and it starts seeming odder that all the other children conform to everything that's told of for them to do, and they're all sitting in rows and doing what they're told, because these disruptive children are doing things like, you know, if they want to go and get a book, they're getting up and going and getting a book. If they want to go and do something, they're going and doing something. And it's like, that's so kind of human to do that. And it's weird that we put children in these environments where we take that away from them and we tell them that that's how they'll learn, by doing what they're told, by complying, by not actually learning the things they're interested in, but learning instead the things that adults think they should be learning. So taking learning out of context. And actually the skills one needs to be a successful child in school aren't particularly useful, I don't think, when you come out of school. You know, they kind of prepare you for a life of doing what you're told and conformity.
Yes. Yeah, the history of school, which you sort of briefly outlined, that, you know, these places don't really have too much evidence to suggest this is the best way to learn. Like, it's essentially it exists through tradition. It exists because, like you said, it was compliance. It's creating a workforce.
Yeah. And I think it was efficient at the start when they didn't have that many adults who maybe had the skills that they needed to teach. They wanted to teach children. And so they put children in groups and they put an adult at the front and they thought this will work. And now we've expanded that massively. So, you know, school started off and it would have been something you might have gone to for a couple of years. And now it's full-time. All, you know, in America, they had like 3-month schools, didn't they? They had sort of short-term schools that you'd go to, you'd just learn the basics, you'd learn to read and write. But now schooling takes up most of childhood. In fact, all of childhood, really, from age 4 right the way through to age 18, full-time. And it's a massive degree of control over children's lives. And it's also a massive degree of intervention into children's lives. And I think one of the things that really struck me as a developmental psychologist, because I did a PhD in developmental psychology before I did my clinical psychology, and I never noticed, and I think most people never notice, that we learn all this stuff about how children develop, and nobody ever says, this is how children develop in the context of school. You know, no one said, we're telling you that these are the things that children do at different stages, but actually, we don't actually know really what happens to children if they're not spending 30 to 40 hours of their week every week for 12 or 13 years in this setting where they are in a classroom and they're being told what to do and they're being taught a curriculum. We don't actually really know, because it's like this invisible environment, school. You know, it's like it's invisible because it's everywhere. You know what I mean? It's just kind of this you just assume a child must be at school. That's what children do. They go to school. And I thought, you know, we don't know how children learn when they don't go to school. And that has been one of the things that has been so amazing for me, watching my own children who haven't gone to school, and then also watching the other children around them, because now I know lots of children who haven't gone to school. You know, before my own children went to school, I didn't know any children who hadn't gone to school. Now I know loads of them. And watching how they develop and how different that is to how a schooled child develops has been so interesting.
Yeah, we should get into the deschooling or unschooling or both. The thing that I think is really interesting, going back to your earlier point, was this idea of like carrying this stuff, you know, we learn in school supposedly out into the real world and how much application it actually has. You made the point that because a big part of sort of maybe organic learning, as it were, is about learning with other people a lot of the time, that in a school environment, that's considered cheating, right?
Yeah.
And that it's totally true. And it, you know, there's obviously a lot of talk in this podcast about systemic issues and capitalism, obviously. But given that, you know, our early training ground is to see other people as competition and that we as individuals are the thing that get graded. It is a sort of interesting, kind of weird. Yeah, we don't know what a society is without this sort of formalized version of school.
Yeah, and I think you're right about the setting up for competition and comparison really early on. We set the whole system up for comparison. We put, you know, 4-year-olds in one group and we compare them with other 4-year-olds. So we put 5-year-olds in another group, we compare them with other 5-year-olds. And they learn to do that to themselves really fast. So by 5 or 6, they're comparing themselves with the other children. And you know, there are these studies where they've shown that you can get 5 or 6-year-olds to rate everybody in their class, and they're very accurate at knowing who's considered to be clever, who's not considered to be clever. They know who's popular and who's not popular. They know who the teacher approves of and who doesn't approve of them. You know, who the teacher doesn't approve of. And it's just like, wow, their sophistication is so... It's so complex, but it's being used for this kind of ranking. The most significant things that children learn at school is where they are in that ranking order. And they learn to think of themselves in a certain way, and other people learn to think of themselves. They learn to think of others in that way as well. You know, are they cleverer than me? Are they less clever than me? Are they better at this than me? Are they less good at this than me? And I think it was a real eye-opening experience for me to see my own children developing without that, and to realize that they didn't see the kind of things that children get compared against other children at school as more important than other things. So they didn't see it as more important whether you could read better than, for example, than whether you could play Minecraft better. Do you know what I mean? It was like all these things that you can compare children on all sorts of things. You can compare them on swimming ability. You can compare them on skateboarding, on cycling, all those sorts of things. And for my children who hadn't been told, you know, reading is really important, maths is really important, it just seemed as irrelevant to be comparing people on English and on reading as it did to compare on Minecraft.
Yeah, and it's really interesting as well that you talk about that there are these sort of developmental stages which each kid is going to be entirely different.
Yeah.
And that there's a lot of parental panic, sort of social pressure, and the school system is standardized. You should be here by X.
Yeah, it starts before the school system. It starts at like tiny ages. You know, you should be rolling over at 4 months. You should be starting to smile when you're 6 weeks. You should be walking at this age. But yeah, and then I guess that creates markets, doesn't it? If we're thinking about capitalism, there's a massive market in your child is behind, or your child is ahead and needs extra stimulation. Or, you know, your child needs this intervention and this intervention because they're behind.
Yeah, and so that, again, so sort of coming back to the Minecraft or the reading thing, it was really interesting reading about the different ages kids learnt the ability to read, and that they found it in their own time. But it would cause a great deal of distress to parents and potentially other adults looking around, like that they might not have learnt to read till they're like a teenager or something. And that's a, you know, terrible thing. But if they found it of their own accord, you know, you didn't have to necessarily, it's that interesting thing that, you know, I'm sure lots of people listening to this or reading your book would be like, what? You just let them figure it out themselves?
Yeah. I know. Well, I think it's not quite right to say that we let them figure it out themselves. It's more that we don't impose it on them until they see it as something that they want to do. And I think that's, to me, is the heart of this kind of autonomous thing, that instead of doing what school does, which school takes learning out of context, it basically takes small children who are really great self-directed learners in my experience, and it takes them out of nurseries, which are often quite good self-directed learning environments. You know, your children can choose what they do. They can choose when they do it. They can relate to different adults. They can follow their interests. It takes them out and it puts them in school, and it says, okay, these are the things you have to learn now. We're going to teach you to read. We're going to teach you to read, even though you yourself might not yet see the point in reading. Because, you know, there are lots of 4 and 5 and 6-year-olds who don't see the point in reading yet, because they can live a perfectly happy 5 or 6-year-old life without knowing how to read. So we take the reading out of context as well. So instead of reading being a thing that you do in order to be able to understand text and in order to be able to, you know, read your instructions on your DVD player, that's out of date, but, you know, at Minecraft, so you can read things there. We take it out of context and we dissect it, and we start saying to them, right, you've got to make these sounds and you've got to add them together. We basically make it a technical task, and we try and teach it to children who are not at a stage in life when they're really generally very technically minded. You know, they're at a stage in life where learning is all about, what do I want to do? What do I want to play? What am I exploring? What am I finding out? How can I experiment about this? So there's just this massive mismatch between what we're trying to do with our young children and how our young children naturally learn. And I think the research you're referring to from my book, which is Harriet Patterson's research, she's a researcher in Liverpool Hope University. And what's so mind-blowing about her research is that she found that children who are home educated learnt to read. I think it was any age between age 2 and about age 14. And out of school, it didn't have an impact on their outcome later on. So there were kids who learnt to read at 14 who were going to college and reading novels at age 16 and were reading for pleasure at age 16. And so what she talks about is, what about if we have this system which in fact creates disability where there doesn't need to be disability? Because if you can't read at age 6 or 7 or 8 in the school system, you're stuck, really, but you can't make progress because the whole system is based on reading. And there will be a whole system that will come into place of, you need extra reading support, you need extra this, you might be diagnosed as dyslexic, all sorts of stuff comes into play. And she's saying, so what about if we just actually didn't do that? And if a home education and parents just like, okay, well, we can learn in other ways until you want to learn to read, until you're ready for it. And actually what seems to happen is that children learn to read at a wide range of ages, and that when they do learn, they learn quite quickly and they become readers who read for pleasure. And that's what I've seen in both my children. And it required a massive leap of faith, I have to say. Massive. It was the hardest bit. Once I'd seen my son do it, it was easier to do it with my daughter. But my son didn't learn to read until he was between 8 and 10. And that was a lot later than I thought he would be reading, a lot later.
Yeah, I think primary school, when I started, I was into reading at home, but then school apparently just took me backwards. Like, they had these reading books about how you're supposed to do stuff. And apparently I just, at that point, refused to read. So testament to the evidence, I guess.
Which is a really common story I hear, because I could actually read before I went to primary school as well. And then when I went to primary school, they didn't really know what to do with me because all the other children already knew how to read. And I very quickly disliked school, really, really quickly. And didn't want to go at all.
Yeah, and it's really interesting what you're talking about as well. Like, super young children are internalizing a sort of hierarchy or a rank in which they see themselves, because that stuff doesn't disappear. You carry that.
Oh yeah.
For a long time. Well, potentially for life, but it depends how sort of introspective you get or sort of forced to get. But, it has huge implications in mental health stuff. I mean, you do sort of document that in the book as well, like this idea that schools naturally will point to the child as the problem, opposed to questioning the environment, right?
Yeah.
That the child is in. Right. And you've seen that sort of turn around, right? You've seen what is considered a problem child in a school setting be able to flourish outside of that setting.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, it's the basic infrastructure of, I think, all our kind of social institutions.
Mm-hmm.
School, what we do in school kind of is, lays a foundation, and what happens at work, what happens. Yeah. You don't comply, then you're stuck in the same system, right? In the mental health system, a lot of mental health issues is about lack of compliance.
Yeah.
And instead of trying to work with individuals in, trying to assess like what's really going on with them, people kind of get further and further sent into places where compliance becomes even more paramount, like prison.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So, it's one of those things where, instead of working with people, we force more and more measures of compliance.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of thinking about it. It's like school is this training ground of compliance, isn't it? And it sorts out the good guys who do it and those who don't. And those who don't usually get get in trouble.
Right. Well, I mean, because also, there is the basic question of, why is compliance so important? What does it do for society? What does it do for individuals? And there's this big question around compliance. But there's also a huge element of, environment. And, a lot of times I remember, when I was going through school, I often became friends with the quote-unquote problem kids.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of times it wasn't, they were fundamentally really cooperative children in many ways, right? Yeah. But they were having massive issues at home. with instability at home, and rather than recognizing that, these are kids that are struggling, with basic stability at home. It's like, school becomes a more punitive environment as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. For those who don't comply, school can be punitive the whole way through, and they can learn really negative things about themselves. So there's a really strong negativity, like, those little kids in them who are already learning that they're not the clever ones, and there are also the kids who are learning that they're the bad ones. And I guess I think you have the same kind of systems, but in England, lots of schools have these systems where they put up on the wall traffic lights or stars and suns and clouds. And if the children are well behaved, they're on the green light or they're on the sun. And if they're badly behaved, their names are moved to the rain cloud. And it's always just about, what does their behavior appear like? There's no attempt at all to understand what is the environment doing here that is meaning that these children are behaving here? And what is their behavior telling us? Is their behavior, for example, telling us that they're really not ready to learn to read yet? And actually, they would probably be better off with a couple more years running around, playing outside, and then they might be ready. There's just no give in that system, is it? It's like, here is the conforming system. If you don't conform to it, the problem is you. And in the last 20 or 30 years, the school system has become more and more controlling. It's become more and more tested. There's more, they call it accountability, but what they mean is testing and anxiety. A school system that just right from really early on is about, you've got to do well here, you've got to do well, you've got to do well, you've got to do well. Parents are anxious, teachers are anxious, and the kids are anxious. And then we say, and if the kids are anxious, there's something wrong with them. Off they go to see someone like me, see the clinical psychologist, and manage their anxiety. And that was one of the things that got me started in thinking about education. It's like, I've got these kids, and there's really nothing wrong with them. What they're telling me about what's happening in their lives, that's what's going on. And I'm being asked to try and kind of patch up the kid without anybody looking at what's going on in their school, what's going on elsewhere, what are their parents, how is everybody interacting with them? Maybe all of that actually is completely natural to be anxious if that's your life.
Yeah, right. It's an appropriate response to
an entirely normal and appropriate response to the exactly. And if we're creating this environment which does this to our children, I feel like as psychologists we can become complicit in that, because we allow that to be defined as a disorder in the children, which needs cognitive behavior therapy or some other kind of therapy, without saying, actually what we're doing to these children doesn't allow humans to flourish, doesn't allow children to thrive and flourish.
There's almost a reversal in the book where you were talking about, alternative schools, and you were talking about one that had an emphasis very much on letting the kids run around in the forest outside.
Oh,
right?
Yes.
But then for one kid, they're like, that's
they want
terrible.
To run in the forest.
They don't want to do that,
yeah.
Right? And you sort of really outlined, like, whatever this alternative looks like, it's not really about any sort of adult ideas about what kids necessarily should be doing. It's kind of following their lead to some degree, right?
I think, allowing them to shape their environment is the way I would think about it. So we as adults, we always provide that environment for them. We always provide the context for them, and we define what's safe and what, that they can't cross roads until they're a certain age or whatever. But within that environment, there needs to be scope for choices. There needs to be scope for, you want to spend all your time in the forest? Great. You don't like spending all your time in the forest. You'd rather be making things out of clay. Great. Or you'd rather be working on a computer. Okay. We have to have those opportunities available if we're really being responsive, and if we're to have any degree of autonomy. Because sometimes with the forest is a good example, because often parents in particular have this kind of idealized view of what children should be doing, and it's running around in an unstructured way in the forest. And for some children, that's just like their worst nightmare. In fact, for me, it would have been my worst nightmare, because I was a very, very keen reader as a child. I just wanted to read. I wanted to be left alone to read, really. And, things like school were an interruption in my reading. Unstructured time in the forest was just not what I wanted to do. And why should it be, really?
Yeah. You're saying that sort of essentially what effective learning looks like it's a process of sort of meaning making and sort of following curiosity, which all, it all makes sense to me, but I can imagine to probably not listeners of the podcast, but some people, I don't know, you can just imagine a lot of uptight people getting very upset about that idea, that it should be about attainment targets and blah, 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 blah. But you have this great example in India of ATM style computer. And I thought that sort of proved a lot, really.
The Sugatra Mitra studies, where they put the hole in the wall and found that children learned how to could learn how to use computers. They were amazing studies. They just put a computer in the wall in Delhi and let children come and discover it. And they did come and discover it. And they learned how to do all sorts of things on the computer. And I think what the bit that really struck me is that they learned how to do bits on the computer, but they watched each other as well. And Sugata Mitra talks about how the group learn in a way that the individual, that being able to communicate between others is a key part of how humans learn, basically. So, one child would discover something and then another child would come along and they would add something to that discovery. And so as a group, the children discovered all sorts of things. And it wasn't that one child by themselves could discover how to use the email or to do search on the internet or all the other things they did. But it was that as the group, they became this kind of learning organism where they were watching each other and learning from each other. And I think that's kind of how I see learning, as something we're always just learning from different places. And when people talk about, to me about my ideas about education, they often say things like, so you just think we should leave kids to get on with it? No, I absolutely don't. I think we need a different way of interacting with children, which is much more like what we're seeing in Sugata Mitra's studies, where children are able to watch us, we're watching children, we're offering things, they're able to say yes or no. And actually, most parents do this with their small children, because small children kind of demand it. It's really hard to sit a 2-year-old down at a desk and get them to do what you want. In fact, it's hard to get 2-year-olds to do what you want, full stop. So most parents adapt to their children's interests when they're 2 and 3. And you'll find that parents have created these great, like my nephew's 3 and he's really, really into diggers. And he has my parents taking him to see the digger whenever he says to visit them. They'll be going down to the local place to see the diggers, and they have toy diggers. My dad's composed a song about diggers. He has managed to structure the environment so he can learn loads about diggers in his environment. And that's just a typical thing that adults do when they interact with small children. But then they get to like 4 or 5 and we're saying, now, sorry, that's over. We're not going to do that anymore. And I think that self-directed learning is with adults and children is continuing that kind of way of adult interaction with a child, where it's, okay, these are the things you're interested in. Let's see if we can find other ways for you to explore that. And maybe ways I can add in things that you hadn't thought about. But you can always say yes or no.
And the whole thing about intrinsic and extrinsic rewards, and just how, again, I guess the intention of adults through time with in regards to like teachers in schools and stuff like that is that they probably mean well, probably depends who your teacher is, but that because of the structure of school, they've completely sort of doubled down on making things more alienating for kids, right? With the rewards and
absolutely.
Stuff like that.
So this is the research. Lots of teachers say to me, we have to do something extrinsically motivated first so that children will then become intrinsically motivated to do it. Several teachers have said this to me. And it's interesting because it's kind of against the research, because the research into motivation shows that when somebody is internally driven to do something, and there's a lot of confusion about motivation, because when I talk about it, people will often say, oh, you mean that they just do what they want to do all the time? For young children, it can mean that, but actually this idea of internally driven motivation is much bigger than that. So to be internally driven with your motivation means that you're doing it for a goal that you have, rather than something that somebody else is making you do. So if I decide that I want to go and learn Japanese, and I'm going to go and get, however I'm going to do that, maybe I'll get a Japanese tutor, or I'll find a book, or I'll do whatever I want, but it's because I have chosen I want to learn Japanese, then that's going to be internally driven. Even if I don't actually really enjoy the process at all, I might be learning that. I might be studying that Japanese textbook going, gosh, this is really hard work, really boring, but I want to learn Japanese, so I'm going to do it. So that's internally driven. Whereas external would be someone who comes along and says, right, you guys, you're all going to do Japanese exam next, in a year's time. I'm going to give you a reward if you get an A in it. Otherwise, I'm going to punish you, and you better work. So that would be external. So it could be the same thing, but that's externally driven. And once you've got that kind of extrinsic motivation, the research shows that the extrinsic motivation actually kind of destroys that intrinsic drive to do things. So what happens is children kind of hand over the responsibility for their learning. Obviously, they don't think about it this way. But as schools say, right, we'll give you stickers if you do well. We'll put you on the rain cloud if you do badly. They're basically taking the responsibility for their learning away from children. And the research shows that the more we do that, the less children are going to be intrinsically motivated to learn, which is a massive contradiction at the heart of our education system, that what we're trying to do, the way we're trying to get children to learn makes them less intrinsically motivated to learn.
Yeah. And also you made this great point about that if stuff wasn't graded, you would probably steer towards the thing that was harder.
Oh, yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Which sort of fits with the intrinsic motivation
exactly.
stuff.
Yeah, and it's so true.
Right.
I think I'd give that example. Sorry, do you want to say something?
Oh yeah, no, I was just saying like the intrinsic, extrinsic motivation also kind of, one of the things that I often deal with in terms of like substance use disorder in people is that people develop this extreme fear of failure.
Yeah.
Right. And like the extreme fear of failure ultimately also in some populations means, well, I'm never not going to fail.
Yeah.
Right. So why not just like go balls to the wall and fail all the time? Right. And that can have, pretty serious and severe consequences on people in life.
Yeah.
In really significant ways. And so, ultimately, like there is a way to be able to do extrinsic motivation that doesn't, necessarily rob people of their intrinsic motivation, but we don't do it that way, right?
Yeah.
Especially in the school system. And and sometimes, this is even a lot of people's home environment too.
Yeah. I know parents are told they need to do this as well. Parents are told that the way to be a good parent is to reward the child when they do well, punish them when they don't do well, set up your star charts. We can put children in this whole zone where everything they do in their life is about extrinsic motivation. I've met parents who have their kids on clickers. They'll be clicking if the child's behaving well and counting up the number of clicks at the end of the day. And it's just, I find it quite mind-boggling to think about what that kind of says about human nature. What are we saying? Why are we saying people do things? Why do we think people do things if we think they have to be rewarded by clickers the whole time to do something?
And again, this must set up all kinds of issues going on as you get older, because if you are compliant and you're just doing what you're supposed to be doing, the danger is that you are completely divorced from meaning, like an internal compass of things that interest you, and then you can just be at sea, right? Because you don't know, you haven't sort of attached like things that are important to you because you've always just been doing what you were told or
doing what you thought you'd do well at. So right, I think that's something that I definitely identify with. I think I chose my choices as I got through the sort of higher bit of school based on what I thought I would do well at and what was difficult, rather than what I thought what I really enjoyed. And I actually didn't really know what I enjoyed. And I didn't really find out what I enjoyed until I got to my third year of university. So I actually went to university to study medicine. And I didn't really enjoy medicine at all. I didn't really enjoy studying science at all, but I was encouraged to do it because it was hard and because I could do it. And so, if you're at school and I don't know if it's the same in the US, but if you're good at sciences, particularly maybe if you're a girl at the time, it was like, do it because not everybody can do science. You can do science, so do it. So I did it and I didn't really like it. And then I had this very lucky chance to do a third year in something different, because of course in the UK we're much more specialized at university much more quickly. And I did a third year in psychology, and I was just like, wow, this is so interesting. And I just feel like, wow, I was so lucky to have that experience, because that was when I started to think, wow, I'm really interested in learning. It was like the first time I was so interested in what I was doing that I was reading books about it outside the classes, and I was just like kind of on fire learning all about psychology, and I loved it so much. I was like, I have to quit medicine. I have to not be a doctor, because I just can't, I just want to go on and do more psychology. But that was the first time that I was kind of reconnecting with that joy of learning and how fun it is when you're learning about things you're interested in. And I feel like I've kind of been on that path ever since, of learning about things that I'm really interested in. That's what my book was about. It's like, I'm really interested in this and how it works. I really want to understand it. And I think we don't need to take that away from children.
No.
Because they have it when they're little. You watch a little small child learning, and they're full of that enthusiasm and joy in their abilities and learning. And then by the time they get to 13 or 14, it's just gone. It's completely gone.
Yeah, you spoke, I can't quite remember the quote now. I do have it buried in this huge load of notes here, but I'm not going to be able to find it quickly. But it's this idea, you were sort of criticizing how the environment maybe works in school or even in the family home, this idea around consent and control. And it's, again, sort of rolling with the theme of maybe being separated from knowing what you want. Yeah, it was that idea that what you can get consent from a kid to do the XYZ thing, but like, is that what they really wanted?
Yes. Yeah. No, I know the bit you're talking about. It's when I say that, to me, it feels like consent isn't really enough, because I feel like you can get people to consent. If you tell children this is really important, if you don't do this, you'll never get a good job, then they'll consent. And that it's not the same as this has value, purpose for me. It's a bit of a forced choice, isn't it? I mean, what choice do you really have? What choice do you really have? You could do what I say and you'll be successful in life, or you don't do what I say and you'll be a failure. What's your choice? And I think a lot of what we talk about with consent with children in education is like that. It's like all the children are saying, and if you ask a group of kids like at 7 or 8 or 9, they'll pretty well all tell you school is essential. I have to go to school. If I don't go to school, I'll never get a good job, because that's what they've been told. And then when I meet the 13 and 14-year-olds, and I meet quite a few 13 and 14-year-olds who are not going to school, their school has been so terrible for them, they can't get there anymore. And they are totally despondent often. And one of the reasons that they're totally despondent is because they believe that if they don't go to school, there's never going to be a future for them. So they believe their future is over already at age 13 or 14. And it's really hard to rebuild that at that age, because the whole system is telling them, you've got to go and do these GCSEs, you've got to go do these exams, or else your life is over. And they really believe it.
Yeah, and then, some of the diagnosis stuff comes into that, because then that's attached to ability or identity and disability, like whether someone is considered disabled because of themselves or because of the environment they're in. Yeah. It just sort of seems to compound from what I read.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I guess then, what is this process of deschooling or unschooling? Because I can imagine there must be a huge class component to this, because I don't know when I look back, for me, if my parents would have been able to sort of teach me at home or anything like that, I'm not sure that's possible. So I assume there's like a sliding scale of like full version of unschooling and a sort of something you can do in between. The person's at school, but at home you're creating a different environment or something like that.
Yeah, so self-directed education is what I talk about more than unschooling, because unschooling is at home particularly, really. It's about taking your child out of school and not doing anything that looks like school at home.
Right.
So my children actually now go to a self-directed learning community every morning for 4 hours. So I don't really think that we are unschoolers anymore, or have been for a while. So the thing that I see as key with self-directed education is that the learner is choosing what they learn, and they're able to say when they want to stop. So they're choosing what and how they learn, and they're able to say when they want to stop. So you can be a self-directed learner taking classes. It's whether you can stop that makes the difference. And in school, mostly children can't stop. They're not allowed to stop. So if they say, actually, I think I've got enough out of this maths class now, I'm just going to leave it for a bit. That's not an option. And I think that I think it's good if parents, say we're thinking about children who are at school, often parents kind of recreate this environment of you can't quit at home as well, because they think that's what children need to learn how to do. So if you've signed the child up for whatever art lessons, and the child says after 2 sessions, actually, I really don't like these art lessons, I don't want to go anymore, you're going to say, I've paid for them, you're going to go to them, most cases. And I think I often say to parents, I know it's really annoying if you've paid for them, but actually, if you can afford to pay for the child to go, you can afford to pay for them not to go as well. What you can't afford is to pay for them to do something else at the same time. Do you see what I mean? So it's like the money's gone, basically. So your choices here are, we make them go or we don't make them go. And I would be erring on the side of not making them go and letting them make those kind of decisions about their time. And I suppose getting out of this mindset of what does the child need to be taught to what does the child want to learn about? What are the things that they find really, really interesting? And if that thing is Minecraft, then I would be embracing that. I would be playing Minecraft with them, joining them in whatever the thing that really ignites their passion is, because I see that process of kind of the ignition of passion as really interesting, but also the kind of reflection in the parent. So, the parent is saying something really important when they're saying, I value the things that you want to learn about, that I value what you value. And a parent could do that outside of school.
Yeah, it was refreshing as well to read stuff that wasn't anti-video game.
Oh, yes. Not at all anti-video games. I'm quite very pro-video games, in fact.
Yeah, well, I can't remember if I'd mentioned this previously on the podcast. I think I have, but one time I was a social gathering and this couple had asked me what I did, and I said, I was at the time I was working doing video games in various roles. And their face, turned to thunder because their kid spent too much time playing video games and not enough time sort of paying attention at school. And I just said to them,
well,
why isn't school like video games?
Yeah.
And that then stumped them. And
yeah.
But there clearly are people who will be consumed by video games in a really sort of at the detriment to other things, like feeling good about yourself or healthy in general.
Yeah.
But they are a space in which, as you said, like kids can stop playing video games when they're bored, whereas in school you can't just walk out the classroom. Well, defiant kids will, but
but you have to be pretty strong. It's a very strong-minded child who walks out the classroom.
Yeah,
I think there are a lot more children who will be in there not wanting to be there, but they'll still be in there due to social pressure.
Yes, and the social pressure is the whole other part of it, isn't it? It's the other kids in the class sort of installing sort of the rules, and then it's the other parents as well.
Absolutely, there's such a strong pressure to conform. I mean, video games are an interesting one because the strong pressure on parents with video games is to kind of demonize them, is to say you're wasting your time on that, to limit them and not to really join their children with them. And I talk to lots of parents who have a really different attitude to their child playing video games than they would with pretty well everything else. They might, if their child was interested in playing board games, they would probably embrace that and play it with them. But because it's a video game, they don't. And I think we miss out a lot, and our children miss out a lot when we don't value their different interests, because I think, there are video games are amazing. There are so many amazing different video games now. And if we're playing them with our children, we can see that, and we can see how much they're learning from it and how valuable they are. And I think particularly for kids who have a hard time at school, actually, video games is where they can feel good about themselves and where they can feel competent about themselves. that where they feel that connection with other people. It's like, we haven't talked much about self-determination theory, but I talk about it in my book. And I think those conditions that we need for intrinsic motivation, autonomy and competence and relatedness, they can be really well met in a video game when they're not being met elsewhere. And I think it's important to be able to kind of nurture that place where kids feel good about themselves and not to turn it into a bad thing.
Yeah, there was a good example as well. I can't remember the name of the kid, but it was basically that was their only place where they, like you said, they felt good about themselves. And I guess that's probably the warning sign, if anything. If there's just one thing that makes you feel good about yourself, opposed to sort of it being spread out, then that's a problem, I guess.
But then taking it away from them isn't going to be the solution. So that's the thing. If there's only one place they feel good about themselves, then we need to be thinking about, okay, what's going on in the rest of their lives? Could we make things better in the rest of their lives? But often what people leap to is, we've got to ban the video game. And then they're left with nowhere.
I mean, it's the same thing around like panic with drugs. It's very similar to panics around like sexual information provided to kids. Like, do we teach kids actually like, how their bodies work, right? No, because it will like get them to do strength. I mean, there is a incredible amount of. I mean, that's kind of like the dichotomy of the function of education, or like the contradictions in a certain way, which is not that we want people to learn and explore, but we want people to basically, like, at least in the United States, it feels like education is like one long preparation for job training. We want you to become employees. We want you to be able to function in a workplace.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's kind of the entirety of a lot of the school system's intent in children is like, okay, like we're going to, you're going to go out and, you're going to be able to function in a workplace.
Yeah. You're going to do what you're told, basically.
Right. But like ultimately it's not a place where we give people information that they need.
Yeah, and we don't help them explore them. As you say, it's not about them exploring. Actually, it's about more of a training.
Yes.
And I think, when people often say this to me, but what about the real world? How are they going to learn to get on in the real world if they don't go to school? And I have lots of answers to it. But one of my answers is, that childhood is this very special time in human life. It's the only time we're not allowed to be economically active. We're not actually allowed. Children aren't allowed to support themselves. It's legally, other people have to look after them. So why would we make them spend that time rehearsing for the adult life when they will have economic responsibilities? They will need to support themselves. Like, we've got like 16 years, 17 years. Well, we don't need to spend all of that time rehearsing them for future life when they might be doing a boring, repetitive job. It's like, let's use that time to do something else.
Yeah, it speaks to something, doesn't it? It speaks to, I don't know, statecraft, control, power. In fact, you had sort of four things, I guess, that were at the end of the book. There was control, power, sort of context, or context-free learning removes meaning, and anxiety. I thought the anxiety thing was really interesting. This idea that, you need that calm base, like there has to be that sort of sense of security for anything to take off. And going back to that video game thing, if like the kids having a terrible time at school, they come home, they play video games, they're getting back to that sort of place where they feel good, and then you take that away. Or
you make them feel bad about it. That's the other thing that happens, because parents feel bad about their children doing that. So then they make their children feel bad about it by saying things like, oh, you're wasting your time, you're addicted to it. And so it's kind of like there's no respite for the child. There's no place where they can just be like, I really feel good with this, and I want to allow myself to feel good about that. Yeah.
And there's a great quote, empowerment can't start with forced compliance. And
it's a contradictory idea, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, but it is. There is something about the school as an example. It's like it is the mini version of what happens when you become an adult, right? Like there is obviously a huge amount of parallels with it
Except
and the
no
workplace.
pay. We don't pay them.
Yeah, well, that was the fascinating thing. Like the way you had articulated one thing was just that, once the kids through that door, like the lack of control they have over their environment, like adults would, generally speaking, refuse some of the conditions of a school, because like you said, you're not getting paid. But actually reading the description of, how a lot of school works and the rules they have, maybe it's not too dissimilar to some of the, warehouse jobs, right? You're against the clock. You've got things to do. So it is, you do wonder what would happen if the school system was built differently, what kind of society we'd have. Now on one hand, there are plenty of people that have probably done self-directed learning and then they've slotted in perfectly well into the finance sector, for example. So it's not like you have these learners and then suddenly you have a different society. But at least you would be starting from, I would have thought, a healthier place, which is just sort of going back to the idea of knowing what is fulfilling for you as a person and not being alienated from your own needs. I think that's a better place to start from than what we currently have.
Absolutely. And I think you said something earlier about making sense of the world. I think I see a lot of what education is doing in childhood, what children are doing whilst they're learning, is about making sense of the world, trying to, they come into this massively complicated, really mysterious world full of people and things and everything. And you can see them when they're small, just trying to put everything together and go, how does this actually work? And then we put them in this school environment and we basically say, this is how it works. This is how it works. You do what you're told. You do this, blah, blah, blah. And if we don't do that and we allow them to keep on making sense of the world, then they're going to make a different sense of it. And I think that is quite different and quite radical. And I think, my kids aren't adults yet, so I don't know what's going to happen when they come out of the other end. But so far, it's been quite unexpected to me how they've developed and how things have come up. Like I would never have assumed that my children would do things like say, I really want to improve my handwriting and spend hours practicing their handwriting, and they just think about the world in a different way. Anyway.
Well, we're coming up to the hour actually, so I don't know, was there anything that you feel like maybe we haven't touched on that you wanted to, or Ikoi, did you have any sort of further questions?
The observation that I have is that, a lot of issues that we have in society often start in the school system, in that, we have these layers upon layers as people grow and age in our social system of just basically not meeting needs, right? Because a huge part of, the question around education and movements like unschooling, et cetera, and everything that you're talking about is meeting people's needs and what that looks like, rather than saying, this is what we want you to do.
Yeah. And these are the way that you're not measuring up.
Right.
Which is a lot of what happens.
And again, like, none of the measurements are about human needs. Like, a lot of the schooling question about how schools are measured and how metrics are taken with, like, quote unquote performance, et cetera, is never about, like, the child, or even, like, the teachers, like, because a huge part of the burnout, for teachers, right, is ultimately that, like, they're also not being fulfilled. The role isn't fulfilling for them. If you go into the teaching profession as a teacher who really cares about children, who is really excited about, the subjects that you're teaching.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Oftentimes, the testing demands that come from the administration, the school system, and some of the issues that, kids are facing, like, ultimately, it's also not doing teachers any favors whatsoever. And it's a huge part of the degradation of, the school environment, not just for teaching, but for actually enthusiastic, caring teachers who want to, provide a good learning environment for children.
Yeah, Absolutely. I think teachers go into teaching usually because they really care about children and they really want to help them learn. And then I talk to so many disillusioned teachers who just, because it's no fun trying to control a group of kids to make them do something they don't want to do. It's just not fun for anybody. And no one seems to say, so what is it really for? What's this system really for? Why is it so important that these test scores are going up and that they do these tests this age and not this age? Just why? I think that's my core question, really. It has been through my whole life. Why do we have to do this?
What was really interesting as well is like there was this thing about summer holidays being a time where kids forget a whole bunch of stuff that they learned.
Yeah.
But then you sort of spun it around of like, well, it's not necessarily a push that we need more schooling. It's just proof that like this stuff doesn't stick because it's not relevant.
Yes, it's not real. Exactly. It's like I have this thing at the moment. My son is getting older and he's thinking about taking exams. And he asked me about the exams I took at school. I cannot remember anything of the syllabus apart from, the ones I have gone on to use, which actually probably aren't many because I'm doing psychology. But, I did German. I did an exam in German. I can't even remember to say hello, what my name is in German. I got an A in the exam, it's just gone. It's gone. And it's like, what is it really for? Yeah, if children actually forget over that summer holiday break enough so that we can measure it and say, look, we've got this lost learning, then what are they really doing? What's it really about? Is it just a giant memory test? Is that what school is? In which case that's a bit demoralizing.
Yeah, and testament to the sort of title of the book here, changing our minds. It's that whole thing of like, this book is for adults to like refresh their thinking about this process that they might have been through and accept it as natural.
Yeah, exactly.
And to your point, Eco, that teachers aren't having a great time either. It's like, well, it doubles down on this idea that if people are getting burnt out, it's because their enthusiasm or their sense of play or enjoyment or their curiosity is extinguished as well. And so, what are we all doing here?
They have no autonomy either. Absolutely. What is it all for? Why?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a huge reason why I don't work in a facility anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Because, any kind of facility usually has these metrics that have nothing to do with the people that, ultimately you're working with. In my case, I'm working with clients who are trying to better their lives.
Yeah.
Right. But the metrics that are kind of imposed on the staff in basically like any care type of infrastructure, is again, like even in medicine, right? It's about like compliance.
Yeah.
I mean, now we have medications that like will, have chips in it that will record like, when you took it, download it on your app, right? So that your doctor can assess compliance. And are there practical, uses for those things? In one ways, yes. And in other ways, it is also a very controlling mechanism, right? That doesn't, because ultimately, like if somebody's not compliant on medication, just like a child not being compliant with school, you have to ask why.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And this is a society that absolutely despises that why.
Yeah. Yeah, but there are people who carry on saying it. There are kids. I meet kids all the time who are saying why. And it's great. And I really try and celebrate them and help their parents celebrate them. Because, I just think we keep on having these kids. They cannot be squashed, basically. They keep on saying, why do we have to do this? We don't want to do this. And I think that's the little spark in them that we have to keep nurturing and keep encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a great place to wrap things up, I think. That's a good ethos. I like it. Massive thank you, as always, to our VIP patrons: Alex Placito, Bruce Rogers-Vaughan, Jennifer Cox, Rebecca Johns, Seamus O'Connell, Sheena Belmas, and Ethan.
if you have enjoyed anything you've heard Harriet say in this program, you will definitely enjoy Capitalism Hits Home, which is a solo program that Harriet does through Democracy at Work, which is a worker-owned cooperative that produces other great programs such as Economic Update with Richard Wolff and the Anti-Capitalist Chronicles with David Harvey. I can't recommend enough that everyone also listen to Capitalism Hits Home if you enjoy It's Not Just in Your Head.
And you can hear more from Harriet on her radio show called Update. It's on Wednesday afternoons and in the WBAI archives.